Hi, everybody. I'm Morgan Loew, the managing editor here at Arizona's Family. And today we have a sort of special crossover podcast. We're going to combine True Crime Arizona with our Politics Unplugged podcast. We have political editor Dennis Welch here and true crime correspondent Briana Whitney, because we are looking into the biggest news story in our area, at least for the past couple of weeks. Absolutely. The murder of Charlie Kirk, the assassination of Charlie Kirk. And it's got a lot of different angles, and we're going to talk about a lot of them today. But we want to start with the latest on the investigation. At the time we're taping this podcast, the district attorney, the county attorney, the main prosecutor in this case held a news conference to announce the latest on the investigation. Briana, you were watching that, taking notes. What did we learn today?
Yeah, we learned quite a bit about the conversations that Tyler Robinson was allegedly having with his roommate and friends, online friends, in the hours after Charlie Kirk was shot. We also learned what may have gone into the planning on this, but it also just gives a lot of insight as to the likely motive in this case. So we knew he was being charged with a slew of different things, but now we have that all confirmed. They are charging him with aggravated murder, which is a capital offense. The Utah district attorney said he will be pursuing the death penalty in this case, which I think is not a surprise to probably anybody who's been following this. He's also being charged with felony discharge of a firearm, obstruction of justice, 2 counts of that, witness tampering, 2 counts of that, and commission of violent offense in presence of children who were at the event. The witness tampering is for directing his roommate to delete texts. And when I just listened to this press conference, that just became a huge part of his own confession to somebody close to him. And it wasn't just his roommate. The Utah County Attorney said that he was dating his roommate who was transitioning from a biological male to a female.
Wow. So they're alleging that he admitted to the crime via these text messages?
Yeah, so a couple different factors that were at play that we learned. For one thing, when the surveillance footage was released, both Tyler Robinson's dad and mom thought, this looks like Tyler, and they asked each other, and both agreed they thought that that was their son, but he was supposed to be homesick. He was homesick that day, and that's what they thought. They also then told other officials that their son had been gifted a rifle recently, his grandpa's rifle, as a gift. They believe that could have been involved, and that did end up becoming the murder weapon in this case. But the roommate plays a huge part because this is all in writing. So what the Utah County Attorney just detailed in this news conference is that after the shooting, Tyler texted his roommate and said, drop everything and look at the note under the computer keyboard. Looks at the note, which basically then said that he had the opportunity to take out Charlie Kirk. And the roommate immediately texted back and said, what? And at this point, Tyler describes that he's left the rifle in the woods and he needs to go back to get the rifle because his dad would kill him if he didn't bring back his grandpa's rifle. And the roommate's confused, being like, you didn't actually do this. You didn't actually do this. And Tyler says he did. The roommate asked Tyler, allegedly, how long had he been planning this? And Tyler said, about a week. And then said, judging from today, I'd say grandpa's gun works just fine. They also discussed a little bit about his family background in these text messages to his roommate. Tyler also said that his dad was a diehard MAGA, very pro-Trump. He also had said in general that there was too much evil in Charlie Kirk and that Kirk spread hate, which there right there probably highlights the motive that was in this, obviously very politically charged. And he's now being held without bail. In addition to the roommate, he also then had this group of about 20 people on Discord that he was chatting with, and also told them that he was responsible for this as well. He basically said, hey guys, this is the quote. Hey guys, I have bad news for you all. It was me at UVU yesterday. I'm sorry for all of this.
Wow.
And goes on to basically say he's going to surrender to a sheriff's friend who he lived nearby, and he did.
There was a lot of talk leading up to this about the cooperation of the suspect's parents and that roommate. Did they talk about that at all?
Yeah, there's been a lot of officials praising Tyler Robinson's parents for coming forward, and they did. It seems that they convinced Tyler to surrender to a sheriff's deputy friend who lived nearby. Tyler allegedly, according to the investigation, was going to likely take his own life and said, I just want to be done with all of this. And they were able to convince him otherwise that he should go forward with turning himself in. Ironically, in his Discord chat, there were people who were obviously concerned, but they thought he was joking. And one of them actually said, well, you don't go to a McDonald's anytime soon, in reference to Luigi Mangione, the alleged murderer in the United Healthcare CEO case, who was seen at a McDonald's. And that was a joke within this Discord group.
Yeah.
And it ended up being real. The parents definitely cooperated. The roommate then eventually told investigators that he was told by Tyler to delete the text messages. But they have them now, and so those were turned over to authorities.
Wow. So we're going to get back to you in a second and maybe dig in a little deeper into that motive, the idea of what the motive was. But I want to pivot here and talk to Dennis and bring him in. And Dennis, this has been a huge political story. What do you make of the political fallout that's occurred?
Yeah, well, let me start with this. We started off the show, we're talking about like one of the biggest stories in our area. It's also very much a local story for us as well. I mean, Charlie Kirk is born and raised in the Chicago suburbs, I believe. Moved out here as a young man, 18 years old, starts Turning Point USA. And he's out, and it comes out here, and they're headquartered out here in the Valley. And from their location here in the Valley, you can't overstate the significance and the influence that Turning Point USA has had on politics in America, and particularly conservative politics here in America. Growing up, I think, Morgan, you and I were close to the same age. Republican politics was mostly identified with older voters. Charlie Kirk was vital to injecting fresh, young energy into a party that was, conservative values, getting people into that. And people have credited Charlie Kirk and his organization for helping Donald Trump win a second term. That is significant. If you doubt the significance of that, look at the reaction across the country. So I'm getting to your question. What is the fallout on this? You're seeing this, the president is a friend of Charlie Kirk, a staunch ally Charlie Kirk was of Donald Trump. He's ordered flags at half staff. I mean, this is something you have normally seen reserved for Senator John McCain when he passed, a guy who was, a war hero, somebody who served in Congress and the Senate for decades. Charlie Kirk, regardless of what you think of his politics, was a political figure. Not an elected official in that sense, and he was a very young man. So you're starting to see like the reactions like that, like let's do this at the flags at half staff. You're seeing vigils and memorials. You saw that yesterday. Just yesterday you saw in Washington D.C. there was a vigil held. We saw a lot of people out at ASU on the campus there. At the arena out there. I forget the name of the arena. It used to be called Wells Fargo, but now it's something else. People showing up there, and we have a big event coming up on Sunday where the president is expected to be at, and is going to be out at the football stadium out in Glendale. That's a 63,000 seat arena for people to go out and memorialize Charlie Kirk. So what's happening right now, what you see is a lot of arguments on like what's the best way to remember Charlie Kirk. You have people arguing over what is the legacy of Charlie Kirk. I mean, he is revered by people on the right, but people on the left would like to point out, it's like, look, there's a complete picture here. You're trying to make him into a saint, but here's a guy who has said incredibly controversial things. The left might say even hateful things that against transgender rights, against the Civil Rights Act, against his opposition to abortion, spreading misinformation about COVID. These are things that are out there. People are arguing, and I'm sure sitting in your desk, you've probably received some of the same criticism that I have. Yeah. When you're talking about this individual, it's like, well, how come you didn't say this? How come you didn't say that? And, Charlie Kirk is somebody who's a three-dimensional character. If we're trying to report on him, he is more than just a political figure. He's a father. He's, a husband. From that perspective, I mean, you have to look at it from just the humanity side of things. This was a tragedy. This was political violence. This is another dark chapter in America. And it played out. We saw those gruesome videos all over social media. That is a tragedy that we lost a human being because of what he was saying. It's regardless, in my opinion, and I think a lot of people's opinion, like regardless of what he was saying, he had a right to say it.
Yeah.
And for him to be shot for that on a college campus, very dark time right now in America. Because remember, just 3 months ago, there was a state lawmaker in Minnesota that was, gunned down with her husband and their dog at their home. So we're seeing an escalation in that. The question right now, I think, is, does it continue to escalate? And are we seeing the type of political leadership? Do we have the type of political leadership in this country right now that can kind of cool the temperature?
Yeah, Charlie Kirk became very famous, was very successful at what he did. And most of what he did, as you pointed out, was talking in podcasts, videos, speaking tours. You don't become successful at that by not saying controversial things. That was in his bag. That's what he did. When I step back and I look at this and I see the reaction to this tragedy, it is certainly a larger reaction than I would have imagined. We would have seen he was fairly famous before, but it does seem that his persona has been elevated. What do you think the ingredients are to this that did this?
I think when you look back at this, it's the modern media platform now. I mean, we grew up in a different time in media and fairly, well known. I think he was very well known if you follow politics. I mean, he's in everybody's phones right here. He was very good at what they call now, what I'm hearing referred to now as the attention economy. Is that being able to get attention and views and likes and trigger the algorithm so he's landing in your phone. So people knew him. I mean, how many times if you were scrolling through a social media platform, come across the "Prove Me Wrong" video with Charlie Kirk? Because he was, he's very good at all of that. He's very good at getting attention on him. To your point, some of that stuff he would say is very controversial stuff. How does he get elevated from that? I mean, this was a very public, very tragic, very gruesome crime. Again, those videos went everywhere and it went quickly. And if you haven't seen them, heed this warning. Do not go see them because they are disturbing and they can't be unseen. And I think that helps elevate this. And then you take that even up another notch. You take it up to the President of the United States that in many ways can set the parameters for what the discussion is in the country. And he is talking about Charlie Kirk. We can get into some of the things that the president has been saying about this, but he has elevated that. So this is just an amazing, amazing moment in American history, a dark moment in American history. I think you get those elements together. I mean, I think this is just, he gets a lot of attention and he gets elevated to this big, huge platform.
Yeah, you were saying he was friends with the president of the United States, friends with the most powerful person in the world. And Briana, with that being said, the investigation into this, when you have the president as your friend and he is saying whatever we need to catch the killer, so unlimited resources, in your experience in covering all kinds of crime cases, did that make a difference in this situation where, you had the FBI and the locals and anything they needed?
Without a doubt. I mean, without a doubt. Even in the press conference today, they were saying that Tyler Robinson's DNA was found on the rifle and cartridges. Half the time it takes weeks to get DNA back. I mean, this was every person we have be part of this and work on it. Even we know that the FBI office here in Phoenix was also part of this investigation as well. I mean, they were pulling from many states, from the federal agency side down to Utah officials, yeah. I mean, they had everything at their disposal. And you knew that the second they had a possibility of who this was, then, I mean, the FBI was going to dig into the digital forensics and throw everything at that. Let's learn what was in the phone, what was on the computer, what was in his apps, what was in his iCloud, all of that immediately. Yeah. I mean, there was no doubt that this was going to get solved quickly. And I think kind of just bouncing off of what Dennis said, I knew Charlie Kirk. I knew he was a controversial figure in politics, but also an energizing political figure. For me, this was all upped in the ante when I saw the videos. And, you know, you hear somebody's shot and then you see that video and all of a sudden it was very real very quickly in record amount of time. And so I think that contributed to kind of
the ingredients that create a persona like this so quickly after that. I mean, he was popular and he was famous before, but his infamy has grown tenfold.
Yeah. And let me add this though too, and so for some of the details that Briana's bringing into this too, as far as the political aspect is going to add a lot to that, because one of the things that we've seen happen is people are arguing about over who's to blame for all this, and everybody's pointing fingers at each other and saying it's the left's fault, it's the right's fault. Some of the details in there are going to add to that, as people haven't checked social media in the past 10 minutes. But, you know, I'm sure it's already out there now that they're going to take some of this information and say, see, we told you. It was, you know, it's this side's fault. You know, because we've seen a big debate about that play out over the past week on this, about who is really to blame for all this political violence. You know, look, just over the past 15 months, we've seen people from all sides of the spectrum, you know, become victims of this kind of thing. And like, and how far back do you want to go? I mean, do you go back all the way, you know, you know, if you go tit for tat, I mean, we're going to end up talking about Lincoln, or even go back even further with, you know, Burr and Hamilton pointing pistols at each other on the banks of the river in New Jersey. I mean, this has always been part of the American story, is this political violence. But as far as like recently, over the past 15 months, you see, you know, assassination attempt on then former Republican President Donald Trump. You've seen I mentioned what happened in Minnesota a few months ago. The latest here today. Arizona has seen its share too. If you go back to 2011 with Gabby Giffords, that is something that we're used to seeing. But you know, again, a lot of pointing of fingers, a lot of blaming. The president is weighed in on this and has been trying to use this tragedy, this crime, to try to blame his opponents on the left for. When the fact is, in this moment, you know, and I don't want to be the both sides guy. I mean, everybody's like labeled that as if you're a journalist and you're presenting both sides, it's like, oh, he's both sidesing everything. Yeah. I'm not doing that. But if you just look at the facts, you know, Republicans and Democrats have been, you know, impacted both negatively by this moment that we're in right now.
Yeah, and I do think that when you watch cable news and you listen to what people are saying, obviously both sides of the political aisle here are trying to use this to better their position, whether it's blaming the other side or claiming the high road or doing whatever they're doing. That is as American as apple pie is using a tragedy to help your side. And that's an actual fact.
Yeah, and the incentives now on social media, remember, there's no incentive to you to be right or even wrong. Just to be seen, be interesting, and be controversial. That's the incentive, and that's the moment we're living in now, I think.
One of the, I guess, kind of surprising results of this is, and there's a dichotomy here. There's an irony. You have Charlie Kirk, who was very for the First Amendment and people's right and ability to say controversial things. And in the wake of his assassination, we have a slew of people who are losing their jobs because of commenting on his assassination in a way that the employers, politicians, people in power don't agree with. And it sort of conflicts with what you would think he would have been in favor of.
Yeah.
How did this happen?
Yeah, I didn't know. I knew Charlie Kirk. I mean, he'd know my name if we saw each other. But I didn't know him well enough to make any assumptions about what he might think at this moment. But I think he would want a debate. I mean, he really did enjoy the back and forth. Otherwise, he wouldn't have made a career out of all of this at this time. But how did we get here? I mean,
how do we get to the point where you could lose your job from saying something political?
I mean, yeah, it's where we're at, and people have, are galvanizing, and getting together and putting pressure on businesses. I mean, most businesses aren't brave.
Yeah,
they're not going to stand up. They're about the bottom line. That's what business is about, and they're not going to stand up on principles if they're going to lose money. In many cases. Just in general, because what I've thought a lot about, like cancel culture and stuff like that, is like a lot of this is basic market principles in action. If enough people saying we're going to boycott your product, I mean, businesses got to take account for that, right? And in situations that we're seeing now, businesses want to get out ahead of that. They don't want to cost themselves anything unnecessarily. Now you can argue also, like in the news media, we've seen some people being fired for what they've said about Charlie Kirk. I believe there was a guy at MSNBC the other day who said something to the effect of like, if you say bad things, then bad things will happen. I can't remember his exact quote on that. I found it interesting that, MSNBC fired him. I mean, this is what you pay analysts for. This is
columnist at the Washington Post says she lost her job.
Yeah,
for posting something.
There was people even here locally losing their jobs at fitness studios.
And that's what I'm talking about too. Some of the stuff like downline. It's like business. They're not brave. They're not going to put up with that. And like I'm not saying that's right. I'm not saying that's wrong. I'm just saying, in the land of free speech, what free speech means is I don't have. It means you can say whatever you want, but it's not free from consequence. It means the government's can't come after me for what I said. Doesn't mean my employer can't.
First Amendment protects us from censorship from the government, but not from private industry and public sentiment and that kind of thing. Those consequences are still there. Briana, I want to come back just real quick, and we had talked about the full scope of the investigation and sort of the unlimited resources. But at the end of the day, this case was solved like countless other basic cases in the smallest counties and the biggest cities. The suspect was identified by somebody who knew him.
His parents. And they then went to officials and... Yes. I mean, now you could say that the law enforcement officials getting the surveillance footage out there quickly was really the first notch in kind of buttoning up their investigation for sure. But that was, I mean, the second this happened, I said, well, they're on a college campus. Of course there's going to be surveillance footage. Something's going to show something. I mean, you knew that was coming. But yeah, I mean, and obviously... There's so much different evidence in this case that the digital forensics from his digital footprint is really going to bolster their evidence from that perspective. The DNA on the rifle and the cartridges from a direct evidence standpoint, that's solid. The circumstantial, you've got the videos of him there. You've got him saying he did it. It all wraps up into what they wanted. But at the end of the day, mom and dad, that's our son.
Yeah.
Something's wrong. I think he did this. Yeah.
Identified him. But you did bring up a good point. The ability and the fact that they got that digital forensic evidence so quickly. I mean, we've covered dozens of murder cases where the detectives wait for months and months and months to get this back. And here it just seemed like
it was so quick. Right. And it just goes to show if you want to solve something really quickly, they can put all their eggs in that basket for sure. Yeah. And I think in this case, though, you do have the American public absolutely demanding answers as soon as possible, which you don't have in a lot of other cases that, unfortunately might fall through the cracks or be put on a shelf and take months. But in this case, I think they knew there's no time to waste here. They want answers. They want to know why. And after today's press conference, I feel like we got a pretty good idea of what was going through Tyler's head, reportedly, what he was telling his friends, why he did this, why he didn't like Charlie Kirk, what he was doing in his own life. I mean, being part of what appeared to be the LGBTQ community, and what he was saying that Charlie Kirk was spreading hate and evil and, all these things. I mean, that pretty much tells you right there what his ideology was.
Yeah, and although it's very difficult and probably not smart to assign intent to somebody, we can lay out what factors led in here. So there was the trans issue and the debate and him not liking the way that conversation was going. There was the fact that he grew up with guns. I mean, he was obviously a very good shot, grew up in a family that had guns. So there's the gun issue there, which is, something in him that said, I have a weapon and I can end this conversation with the weapon. What other factors out there in this sort of slew of pieces of motive have we seen?
Well, the other thing that became apparent from the notes he left the roommate was also a week out saying, there's an opportunity to take out Charlie Kirk, so I'm going to do it. And the opportunity factor of he's going to be in the public. He also expressed disdain for the fact that Charlie Kirk was coming to UVU and hey, this is going to be dumb. He used some word like dumb or something like that. I need to go back and listen. But I mean, basically it was like, this event's stupid. Charlie Kirk is a hateful guy, according to Tyler Robinson. And I now have the opportunity to do this. But what was so weird was, you can see all these things falling in line. He grew up in this conservative family, but clearly has diverted from that with his own personal beliefs and what he was doing and aligning with.
Rebelling
Yes.
against your upbringing.
Yes.
That's another factor on this list.
But so bizarre because while he was, texting the roommate that my dad's MAGA and all this, he's now also concerned how his dad's going to feel if he leaves his grandfather's gun in the woods. So it was almost like this maybe internal conflict with how he viewed his own parents. Like, my parents are going to kill me if I don't bring back this family heirloom, but I also disagree with their views, and now I'm going to kill Charlie Kirk, who likely has the same viewpoints as his own parents.
Yeah.
Odd.
He wasn't, piss off parents. He still cared about what they thought. And then the final ingredient in this is he was heavily into these video games and used some of the terminology that they use in these violent video games. So you really have this sort of stew of ingredients, and it's going to be, the public, politicians, and the prosecutors are going to come up with their idea of what a motive was. But I am sure that there are actual psychiatrists and psychologists who are going to look at this and say, all right, what out of this ingredients built a murderer?
Yeah.
And that'll be an interesting paper to read.
And I also think like one of the interesting things coming out of this as well, from what I'm hearing and reading and seeing, this was an open air event.
Yeah.
He was well, publicized ahead of that. What kind of chilling effect that has on politicians, be it with town halls. We've kind of seen the death of town halls over the past 10 years anyway. We haven't seen a lot of those from elected politicians, particularly like, congressmen and women. But I do know people are concerned about that. I spoke with Attorney General Chris Mays last week about this, and she does a lot of open air events, just like Charlie Kirk did with his, Prove Me Wrong, Take America. I can't remember the name of the tour he was on. But he was doing this again. You're going to see politicians want to interact and be, free to go have discourse like this with political discourse. Because if you don't feel safe doing that and going that, that's it seems to me it's a bit anti-American. It seems to me to be very American for people to go hash out their political differences with a debate and whatnot. And I do know, as we're speaking today, there was, there's an issue in Congress. They have to, get a budget done, a funding bill done to fund the government by the end of the month. And there is a proposal out right now that would kick the can down to November 21st, keep government open until then. But included in that bill is tens of millions of dollars for added security for members of Congress and I think Supreme Court and stuff like that, as people are becoming more and more concerned, more and more worried about the escalation of this political violence we're seeing in the country. So that's another marker that you see there. What I hope is that we don't see politicians kind of retreating back and giving us opportunities to see them, less and less in more unscripted areas like town halls and and just regular speeches.
Yeah, it's already difficult to get politicians off the script so you can see them how they really are as human beings and not as this sort of polished, scripted, made for the phone screen or the TV screen.
Yeah. It's tough. It just hit me too, and I was wondering if we'd heard anything about like the help from the FBI and federal resources during this press conference, because I know today Kash Patel, the head of the FBI, was speaking in front of Congress, and he was going to be fielding some questions about how he handled this investigation, because just like anything in America, you do anything, you're going to get criticized for this in the public eye, right? And he took some heat over how this was handled. Did the prosecutors in Utah or anything mention the help from the FBI? Did they mention anything about that in a press conference today?
I came up here at the end of it, so if he did, I may have missed it. I think now that the FBI has been part of getting this information out that really starts to explain where this comes from, there's some praise on that end, but I think they are still going to face the heat of the fact that they were wrong multiple times in terms of we have a person of interest released. And actually, Tyler Robinson, in texting his roommate, the roommate said, well, I thought they caught him. This was right after. I thought they caught him. There's video of this guy. And Tyler Robinson said, oh, yeah, they captured this old guy, wrong guy. And then they also questioned somebody who else had on black and kind of like tactical light clothing. But Tyler's like, it wasn't them. It was me.
Yeah, there was real criticism of Kash Patel and the FBI from conservative side of the aisle in this, because the director of the FBI, the head of the FBI, generally does not say anything that he or she does not believe is true and is vetted. And here in Arizona, we know what "we got him" means. It's it's a political phrase here. Our former governor, when he believed the DPS had caught the freeway shooter and said, we got him. And it turned out that was apparently the wrong guy. Yeah. And so that sort of, we got him, we didn't get him, we got him, that I think is going to linger. That's going to be a lasting legacy.
Let me ask you something too, because you're both a lot more versed in this. One of the things he was also criticized from what I read was some of the information he was releasing. He was releasing a lot of details. My understanding, does that, why is he being criticized for that? Because I've heard in the past, the more details you put out on things, it makes it harder to conduct an investigation because for various reasons. What do you guys know about that?
From my perspective, I think yes. I mean, typically they're not going to release the details that only the killer would know if they're searching for the killer, because they don't want to scare that person off or, give them any opportunity to leave before they can get them in custody. I think this was a bit of a unique situation because everyone was demanding answers, and I think they did not know who this was at first. So now you're trying to get enough detail out there for the public to maybe know something to come forward with, hopefully the right guy. I think that's probably where that's born from. Also, maybe he was, getting certain pressure from the White House. Maybe his relationship there could have played a factor. Okay, they want more. We're going to give them more. That's my take on it. Morgan, what do you think?
Yeah, they don't want to release anything that only the killer knows. So if they get a chance to be in the room with the suspect and they know something that the real killer did, and let's say the suspect is somebody who's for some crazy reason is coming forward and claiming to be the killer. And they say, well, tell me about X, and the suspect doesn't know about X, then they know that that person is not there. I mean, that's just one example. And the reason you would know that is if you're a seasoned prosecutor, a seasoned defense attorney, a seasoned law enforcement officer, or a seasoned FBI agent. And generally speaking, those are the people who have been tapped to lead that agency, and they're very reserved in what they release. We as members of the media get frustrated because we often see or know details that we think should be released that wouldn't have an effect on the investigation, and law enforcement doesn't release them. So I think that this was a warning shot for the people who were worried about Kash Patel being the head of the FBI, that he doesn't have the judgment or the experience to do that job. And this was really the first big test, and I think it would be very difficult for anybody involved in law enforcement to say that he passed with flying colors. He appears to have saved his job. His job does not appear to be in jeopardy, and they caught the guy, and nothing messed up the investigation. So that did not cause a problem here. Yeah. But I do think that it is worrying other people and people, within the federal government from what I've read. Yeah. So Briana, what happens next? It seems like we've had this is a week. I mean, it's not even a week, and all this stuff has happened. Is this really going to slow down now, the information that comes out and the process for prosecuting this person, the process for, definitively finding out what the motive was and if there was anybody else involved in this?
Yeah, I mean, I believe so. Tyler will appear virtually in court at the time of recording this in a few hours. So that'll be the first time we see him. Since this all unfolded. He's being held without bail, so he's not going anywhere. That would have also been, could he bond out? No. Yeah, a lot of information right up front, but then when you really go into the actual case itself and now discovery starts, I mean, it's going to be a capital case. Capital cases take a long time to unfold, a long time to investigate. As they always say, the wheels of justice move very slowly. So yeah, I think it'll be little bits and pieces. And it's not every case that people pay attention to hearings, but they might for this one. Kind of like Brian Kohberger, people were tuning in for every single little hearing about, can this evidence be admissible? What about this? What about the DNA? This, that. I think people might pay attention to that in this case as well. But overwhelmingly, a lot of what's going to happen next will happen behind the scenes. And I think you'll hear more about the political fallout for a while as opposed to the actual investigation, because I think they're going to release what they're going to release about how they caught him, and then the actual process to head towards eventual trial or a plea deal begins.
Yeah. I'd wonder if a plea deal, let's talk the political climate right now, is a plea deal even offered, because I mean, people, want this guy executed. We've had the president go after him and say, I hope they pursue the death penalty. I believe.
I can't imagine there'll be a plea deal offered here.
Yeah, I mean, is that even a realistic, thing to think about? Because, God, if they offered a plea deal, it's like you get life in prison. I mean, people want this guy to be executed,
right?
And I think there's going to be a lot of people that wanted to be executed with that firing squad. Yeah. I mean, that's where people's heads are right now. So I'm just kind of interested, even in this political environment, if you could even offer that. In other cases, I mean, there'd be maybe some questions about whether he could even get a real fair trial, because not a lot of people in America right now wouldn't have a lot of information on this case going into it, right?
Yeah, you need a jury of your peers. It doesn't mean a jury that has never heard of the crime. I mean, although I am constantly surprised at how many jurors they are able to find who have never heard of the case, and we know the case like the back of our hand. But Briana, this is in Utah. Utah is a pretty conservative state. Are they going to have trouble finding an impartial jury, a year, 2 years, 3 years down the road when this actually goes to trial?
Yeah. And then where do you move it to try to get an impartial jury?
Guam.
Yeah, I was gonna say, out of country. I don't know. Yeah, and that's what you and I see a lot when we're covering murder trials, high profile murder trials, even just statewide. And those have some national appeal half the time. And even those are getting moved counties. This is a whole nother level that we haven't really experienced recently. I would say Brian Kohberger was the most high profile murder case we've seen in some time in the country. And that is, this is a completely different situation. The president is involved in this. I don't know where you send this for an impartial jury, but if you're not going to give a plea deal, you must find an impartial jury.
His defense team has a real challenge. Okay, we're going to wrap this up pretty quick, but Dennis, I do want to talk about what's happening this week. We are sort of in vigil and memorial season. We've already had a memorial here in the Phoenix area at ASU. There's a memorial out in front of Turning Point USA. There was a memorial in Washington, D.C., and we've got this big event coming up on Sunday at State Farm Stadium, home of the Arizona Cardinals, 60,000+ seats. What do we expect from that event, and is that going to be really like the end of the goodbyes here?
It puts a capstone on this part of this of this story. What to expect from Donald Trump? Wow. I would imagine he's going to be angry when he shows up on stage and say and express how angry he is about this. Because this is like, a close political ally of his.
They've set aside a few hours for this event. This is not an hour-long, memorial. I don't know what I don't know who's on the agenda. The only thing that I know is that the president is coming. Are we going to see partisan political statements? Is this going to be a religious event? Have you heard of any Democrats who have been invited?
Yeah, I do know that the governor won't be speaking or saying any words at this event. Not a shocker there. Wait to see who's going to be on that list. I mean, and we'll give you a better idea of how, political this will be. I mean, the president is just a political animal. Everything is political with him. A lot of people said he's not really working to try to cool the temperature at this point. And we'll be interested to see if he changes tact when he gets to Phoenix on that stage, or if he continues down the road that he has been going down. Be interesting too. Is Carrie Lake going to show up on stage? You saw what she said the other day, is urging people not to send their kids to college where they will be brainwashed and radicalized. So we'll watch for some of that. I would imagine that the widow will Charlie Kirk's wife will be there. She has vowed to carry the fight Charlie's work on and moving forward. And after that, after all is said and done on Sunday, I think we see where it goes from there. And one of the questions I have is, how does Turning Point USA move forward without such a charismatic leader? I mean, if you think about any big organization that has this big, larger-than-life person, very charismatic, how successful have they been? I mean, moving forward after that.
Yeah, this isn't the American Red Cross, where you don't know who the leader is, but everybody knew Charlie Kirk really before they knew what Turning Point USA was. So that is a valid question. Is there a future with as much influence for that organization as it has enjoyed?
And again, we were talking about his ability to grab that kind of attention. I mean, this was a young, again, throw the politics, his politics out. He was a young, charismatic leader of this group who knew how to get attention. Is there anybody else like that? I don't know.
Maybe an up-and-coming teen?
Yeah.
Just like he was? I don't know. Somebody young?
Yeah, and you got to find that.
Yeah.
But you got to trust them. How can they move the organization forward? Because, again, their influence, I'm just talking about Arizona, where I'm more comfortable talking about, their influence on Arizona and Republican politics here can't be overstated. I mean, there are people that will tell you, would come into this podcast room and tell you that they believe that Turning Point USA has more influence and more power than the Arizona Republican Party right now.
Wow.
And they would make a good argument as to the reason why. I mean, these are people that can go out, register large groups and numbers, and more importantly, on during the election, can get the vote out, which is important.
The young person vote.
And they're recruiting
young people.
and they recruit candidates, and they've got a slate of candidates right now running statewide. I mean, these are people that are very involved and very, very effective at what they do so far.
Have we left anything out?
I don't think so. No, I mean, I think, learning Tyler Robinson's past and all that he shared in these text messages and online really does show that there was some planning here and also some thought on the back end of this too.
And that's, so you looking at this as a crime case, what's your, unanswered question? What do you want to know?
I kind of want to know why he thought that was the best route, because it does seem that he has some remorse for others on the back end of his crime. I think for me, covering true crime, I'm always fascinated by the psychology of something and why something happened the way that it did. Obviously, we can see that he, was supporting LGBTQ rights and seemed to have an issue with Charlie Kirk's comments in that realm, and just maybe a disagreement on a lot of topics.
Yeah.
But he seemed to apologize to his roommate / romantic partner about his parents learning certain things. He apologized to his Discord chat group of 20 people. Sorry to get you guys involved. Sorry about everything I've caused. That's an kind of odd response on the back end. So I have some questions as to how do we get from point A to point B?
He's sorry about all of that, not sorry about killing a guy.
No.
Yeah.
And he talks about it relatively casually too. Like, I had this opportunity to take out Kirk. I'm going to do it. And the gun's over here. I got to get the gun. And it was odd because, I mean, he's 22 years old and you can see that in the way that he texts about it. We're using things like LMAO and IDEK, like things that the younger kids are saying. But as somebody who just assassinated, reportedly, a huge political figure. So I do have some questions on the psychology front there, like how he chose that, why he chose that, even if he disagreed, if everybody else in his life he's apologizing to for it, where do we get to there,
Yeah. Dennis, what's your lingering question here?
I think we just went over the big lingering question is where's Trump going to be when he gets here? I mean, he's got a lot of power just to influence the debate. Is he going to choose to try to lower the temperature here? I'm going to be fascinated to see and hear what he has to say on stage.
Yeah, what his temperament is, what his message is. All right, Dennis Welch, Briana Whitney, thanks for your expertise here. This is a story we are going to continue to cover here at Arizona's Family, including on Sunday with the big memorial. So keep watching us on TV, online, and streaming. And when we have some more updates to bring, we will bring them back. And thanks for watching and listening to this special Politics Unplugged and True Crime Arizona combination. We'll talk to you later.